I include PowerPoints of the figures I refer to as aide de memoir for this talk, but the only image in the manuscript of light sleep is Fuseli's nightmare. PowerPoints can seem to subtract from the illusion of narrative. It might seem to have been better to let the words speak for themselves without any glossing. But given the diverse nature of our audience, the very diverse nature of our audience, it seemed better to include this aide de memoir. The first passage is about the evolution of sleep in relation to longevity. The second, why sleep matters so much to me. And the third unpacks the notion that the elderly do not need so much sleep, which the prior speaker tried to address very forcefully. So, passage 1. Snails sleep from 2 to 3 days, but do not dream. They have not adapted to a 24-hour circadian clock. For fish and other lower reptiles, the jury is out. Their 24-hour clocks have REM sleep, but only for seconds, and so far no evidence of dreaming. Nor do insects dream. Today, authoritative scientists claim mammalian dreaming is a holdover from our reptilian brains. All living things sleep, owing to the 24-hour cycle of night and day. Since the 18th century, it has been known that plants sleep. I had the pleasure of writing the biography of an Enlightenment figure who discovered the sleep of plants. All mammals sleep and dream, as do trees, and the tree dreaming and tree sleeping is now a big study in science. And the higher up the evolutionary ladder, the more REM, the more dreaming. Hominins were our ancestors 2.5 million years ago, living in trees and sleeping in trees. When they came down to earth as Homo erectus and slept on the ground, they slept more deeply, more REM sleep. The anthropological theory is that Homo erectus slept fewer hours than other primates, but had higher sleep quality. The new sleep on the ground produced abundant dreaming, the crucial element in sleep, so much so that no fact I know in sleep science, and I don't know if Ingehilde will agree with this, no fact I know in sleep science is truer than the metonymy of sleeping and dreaming. A forge might as well separate the two integral parts of steel. The great evolutionary question is not when Homo erectus began to sleep, but when abundant dreams began. The brain of Homo sapiens was much larger than the brain of Homo erectus. Homo sapiens commencing around 420,000 years ago. But Homo erectus was dreaming long before then. And once you get serious, my friends, about the longue durée of sleep, or we would say the longue durée of aging, evolution begins to capture your soul. I applaud Georg Lukács, the great Hungarian theorist, when writing literary history in his evolutionary mode. That famous chapter about epic evolving into novel over the centuries, just as the dinosaurs did into birds, evolving languages, evolving genre, evolving political systems, evolving life cycles, evolving sleep. The purposes of dreaming remain a mystery. Was it to restore the anatomical, physiological, corpuscular matter? Was it to clean out the brain's detritus? Or was it other possibilities? Every organism has some type of brain, although insects can be decapitated and live on for days. Neurons are necessary for brain. Unicellular viruses and bacteria have no brains, but more highly evolved creatures do. The evolutionary transition occurred when sufficient neurons produced a brain in need of circadian rhythm. Precisely how the circadian rhythm was instaurated, how evolutionary anthropologists are approaching this, we do not know. But higher up the evolutionary scale, the infants of all mammalian species dream more than others in the life cycle. And the elderly, the question we might be most interested in, senescent dreaming is now under investigation in a big way. And that's one of the things I want to talk about. In all major cosmologies, Eastern and Western, the deity's supreme gift to Homo sapiens was judged to be the gift of language, the logos. Yet as sleep scientist Matthew Walker, professor of neuroscience and director of the Sleep Center of the University of California at Berkeley, notes in Why We Sleep, just published recently, it is impossible to separate sleep and dreams. I quote, "The two states are one. They are one brain state, and brain states need language to decode them." But what can Walker mean? Dreams are inseparable from the sleep state producing them, yes. But what about the daydreaming and reverie occurring during waking, when the circadian clock is in its daylight phase? Walker, like the much less neurological Freud, elevates sleep. All their research, why do we sleep, elevates sleep because of its dreaming components. So dreaming becomes the integral restorative process for life. The idea is that dreaming repairs, dreaming restores, dreaming cleanses the detritus of memories in the brain. We cannot approach senescent sleep until we know what we mean by sleep itself. Of course, Walker would say what we mean by dreaming. Contemporary sleep theory is that deprivation of sleep produces autoimmune compromise, obesity, dementia, and all the rest we've been told about. Walker does not extend his contextual tentacles back to Homo erectus. He is concerned with the here and now of why we sleep. It is the question contemporary sleep scientists are asking. Now, the framing of context is very serious business for someone in the kind of work I do. I'm a cultural historian, and contexts mean a lot to us. Historical anthropologists can prove that Renaissance agrarian folk slept in biphasic segments, starting at nightfall, awakening around midnight for a meal, returning to sleep until dawn, light and dark in the 24-hour clock. Social historians have demonstrated this segmented sleep in a number of Renaissance references to first and second sleep. The pattern changed when people grew accustomed to exploiting hours of darkness, when they could afford candles, and then when they could afford street lighting. Since about 1800, sleep science has proceeded as if all but a consolidated 8-hour sleep is unnatural. But Jonathan Swift, for example, his Strulbergs in Gulliver's Travels in 1726 Dublin are post-senescent creatures who live to 800 years in that satire, dozing off for whole decades in daytime slumber. Swift is very clear about this. So maybe the 18th century has some sense of this dementia beginning. I mean, there are passages, Jane Austen maybe. The Strulbergs appear not to have brains to restore, memories to cleanse, yet it appears that Swift's Strulbergs are steeped in dementia of some kind. Passage 2. I wish someone could show me how I got so invested in sleep long ago, when no one in my humanities crowd was interested. Our ethos is the opposite, sleep obsessed. Arianna Huffington, for example, of Huffington Post, recently committed much of her billion-dollar fortune to revolutionize sleep in the workplace. She wants daytime naps for everyone, as the Japanese did before her. Every town has a sleep center, actograms, polysomnograms, sleep clinics, CBT, you know the rest of it, Sleepio, for example, my Fitbit watch measuring exactly how many cycles I sleep every night. And books, everyone is writing books about sleep. It's not just the neuroscientists. 24 books in English just in the last few years, and as many about insomnia. Gail Green, for example, an insomniac academic in California who has attended sleep conferences, she tells me, for 35 years, has written the most eloquent diatribe I know against sleep science. Why? It's cover-ups, it's collusions with pharmaceuticals, the way sleep scientists themselves avoid the big issues, refuse to go against the dominant grain, and so forth. Gail's theme is that you should declare your interest in sleep right from the beginning or be marginalized. Bill Hayes, a journalist who writes for The New Yorker, and loves words like hypnopompic, the state immediately preceding awakening, is the late Oliver Sacks's much younger insomniac lover. Oliver Sacks, the great, wonderful writer about literature and neurology. Hayes has written 2 memoirs about insomnia. The first is a sprawling essay called Sleep Demons. The second is called Insomniac City, a book about Hayes's life with Oliver, who enjoyed good REM sleep even when Oliver was dying of cancer a few years ago. Hayes roams through the realms of insomnia, making a good case for New York as the sleepless city. Remember John Ricci, he wrote about LA, but only as the city of night. Hayes goes beyond that. Hayes also explains why Dr. Nathaniel Kleitman, the great Moldovan Jewish 20th century guru of sleep, who discovered REM sleep in 1953 and lived to be 104, he got poetic justice for his work, and could claim at his death, sleep has become a major interdisciplinary subdiscipline. Now, the humanities and social sciences do not lag in this work. Jonathan Crary, who succeeded the venerable Meyer Shapiro at Columbia in the chair of cultural theory, thinks sleep is the crucial issue of our post-postmodernist, post-digital, wired-up world. Crary's splenetic counterblast is that sleep deprivation is a standing affront to capitalism. The erosion of synapse sleep culpable because it has so ignominiously been brushed off in the myth that the old do not need much sleep. Andreas Mavromatis, a Cypriot polymathic professor, has spent his whole life studying. Crary's books have been now translated into most languages. Mavromatis has spent his life studying states of consciousness hovering between wakefulness and sleep, hypnagogia, including literature from Poe and Baudelaire to Cocteau and Beckett. The elderly abandon themselves to the care of others, but even their nocturnal hypnagogia, let alone their fractured sleep, as we heard, is devalued as continuity into the death state they soon will enter. So I'm suggesting very much a politics of sleep. Sumners Bremner, an Israeli literary critic, has written not a poetics of insomnia, but a history of insomnia extending back to Gilgamesh and Homer, China and Japan. She rebukes modern medicine for configuring insomnia as if prescription drugs and other short-term solutions are its only interventions. But medieval demonic possession, Renaissance lovesickness, early modern melancholy and ennui got there centuries earlier. Wired up 24/7 hyperconnectivity has increased insomnia, but not engendered anything new per se, except the acceleration of everything. German historian Reinhard Koselleck, building on the insomnia theory of Levinas and Walter Benjamin, claims sleep was not an idiosyncratic evasion of or escape from history, showing that sleep is merely another form of historical time. Social historians like Sasha Handley have reacted and recreated the history of the bedroom, the bed, the mattress, pillows, sheets, fabrics, down to the way fabrics were preferred among the rich in the early modern period for their feel to the touch of the finger in the disquiet of falling asleep. Jacqueline Rose, closer to home in London, a British academic, titles her wide-ranging study of the place of psychoanalysis in the modern world on not being able to sleep, as if insomnia provides the clue to psychoanalysis through its politics of insisting on remaining awake, alive. On the other side of the ocean, Elizabeth Hardwick, who edited the New York Review of Books, explained why she conceptualized the middle region of her life as sleepless nights. I will return to Canadian medical anthropologist Margaret Locke in a moment. Yet it is already clear that a century after Freud published his 1889 interpretation of dreams, describing dreams' vexed relation to sleep states, our generation is already becoming unsettled by this ring-fenced area for different reasons. And whereas Freud privatized dreams and banished them to the night, our 24/7 hyperactivity has more grimly medicalized sleep, erasing defective sleep's creative spheres. I was 25, a beginning lecturer at Harvard, when I walked into the Harvard Medical School sleep clinic asking for help. Charles Czeisler, who would later make Harvard's sleep clinic world famous, was not yet there, but other clinicians were. The man attending me was older than I was. I was 25, he was maybe 28. Blonde, tall, Christian, everything I was not. I suppose I did idealize him in that immediate transfer in the first few moments. His conclusion, anxiety. But he administered no hypnotics. How could any new lecturer at Harvard on a steep learning curve not be riddled with anxiety, I told him. Even I knew that. I didn't have to go to the Harvard Sleep Clinic for that. Well, he said, you know, the competition in getting the job must produce a terrific amount of subconscious anxiety. I wanted a doctor who would help me to sleep, to hit the pillow and be out, not tell me that I was anxious. So I started quoting Walter Benjamin to him, and oh, the tragedy of the last 2 centuries. And when I stay awake at night thinking of Benjamin, if he had only stayed alive one more night, he would have crossed the Spanish border, he wouldn't have died, and so for all the Jews who died and why he was dying for their death. And he said, I think you've been reading too much Freud. I said, I'm talking about Walter Benjamin. He said, I've never heard of Walter Benjamin. Well, you can see where this interchange went downhill from here, and the idealization kept going down. Temperamentally, I've been a worrier from the age of 3. Every time I hit the buffers, deep sleep disintegrates. Worst of all, when in 1982, I spent the year in Amsterdam as a Fulbright professor and cultural attaché to that wonderful country, the Netherlands. My nephew, being an orthopedic surgeon aware of my sleep dilemmas, gave me a going-away present. A huge box of Halcyon he purloined from the hospital pharmacy, wrapped in red ribbons. Halcyon is a sedative hypnotic in the benzodiazepine class of medications that induces a debilitating cluster of adverse effects. Often called Halcyon madness, it almost drove the late American novelist Philip Roth to suicide, and it certainly undid me in Holland, so much so that I could no longer walk to the university on the Rappenberg, and on Queen's Day, Koningendag, I had to be carried on a stretcher to a KLM jet by 2 lecturers to take me back to America. Now, Halcyon had already been banned in Denmark. The Danes were the first to see the problem with Halcyon, but not in America. So I sat in a chaise lounge all summer praying for recovery. But Xanax, another benzodiazepine hypnotic, was prescribed as freely as aspirin in America by the end of the 20th century. And taking it that summer, I survived well enough to go back to finish my term in Holland, but under the influence of this thing. So here I concluded there was no possibility for good sleep in my life. What was the reason? Oh, George, you're changing jobs, you're changing country, you're changing lovers, spouses, even bodily organs. But country is the main thing. America to Holland, America to Britain. No wonder that wonderful word in all languages, Vaterland, la mère patrie, madre patria, and so forth. Now, mine is primarily primary insomnia without underlying medical cause, while secondary insomnia is with medical cause. Primary insomnia is more difficult to tackle than secondary because its sources are obscure, often within the subconscious. For years, I have followed sleep hygiene protocols, especially the 20-minute rule, forbidding you to stay in bed for more than 20 minutes if you cannot sleep. But no contingency theory I know can predict a particular night and how it will go. On nights when I think it will be good, I've had a good day, it's terrible, and vice versa. Contingency won't work. The only thing that works is to stay awake in my purgatory and think and sort of plan in this twilight world of 3 a.m., 4 a.m., 5 a.m. I have made my peace with this second phase of night by developing a mental routine while I stay in bed. Lying in this purgatory as I do most nights, I try to imagine myself under the protection of some deep sleep goddess. I don't know who, but some goddess. During these nocturnal routines, the truth urge makes stronger claims on me than in waking daylight, while also striving to locate the humorous in my ridiculous form of insomnia. I have even begun to wonder if these vivid idiosyncratic rites constitute an early form of dementia, despite remembering them very well after dawn's rays have come up, Ingehilda's point. So my life is not dark as I grow older, but increasingly faced with mortality. Passage 3. How to situate the scandal about senescent sleep. It is scandalous, and I thoroughly agree with the Berkeley people. The claim that the old need less sleep altogether, not just light sleep, but less sleep, is scandalous. Culture drives it. Views about senescent needs. I'm claiming this is a form of prejudice. And how do these ideas about the elderly, these constructions, get passed on from person to person, from group to group? Not in learned conferences like this one, but in ordinary non-professional life. Richard Dawkins, the evolutionary biologist, coined the term meme in 1976 and described memes as units of cultural transition and transmission, which propagate themselves in the meme pool, a process which, in the broad sense, can be called imitation. Imitation is the important word. The Oxford English Dictionary defines a meme as an element of a culture that may be considered to be passed on by a non-genetic means, especially by imitation. In both definitions, cultural information is copied by imitation. Imitation included in learning and watching the form of behavior. Late 19th century behavioral psychologists demonstrated the fundamental component of imitation as new behavior learned by copying it from someone else. A century later, we mark the essence of imitation by distinguishing it from the less subtle contagion, as in the bank scandals of the last decade. Now, at my age, I think increasingly about actualization, realization, the persons we really are. But senescent selfhood can seem too amorphous for some scientists, unless grounded by a person, a purpose in life as the nutrient of happy and healthy old ages. Some of our keenest philosophers of selfhood are dissatisfied with purpose, more likely to configure selfhood in terms of systems analysis and cognitive vitality, such as the autonomous self as a system, an autopoietic system. Some philosophers of selfhood sink their tentacles deep into the pre-literate past. For example, Dennett's book, the wonderful Dennett, who sinks his teeth into pre-Cartesian historical consciousness. What is selfhood? Dennett claims selfhood is an organ of unification, a communication control system enabling the human brain to remain intact as long as possible. Dennett continues that for humans, slow biological evolution has been superseded by fast, modern cultural imitation. We watch what we see about the elderly, and we keep propagating these memes about the senescent. So it is as much a way of behaving as anything else. A way of behaving that can be copied, transferred, and so forth. The combination of memes and senescence opens a window leading to happy old age. Specifically, how do we behave towards the elderly in an era of longevity, in what the demographers are now calling the fourth age of man? And if Dawkins and Dennett's biological realism is valid, what are we transmitting about the elderly in these memes? What are we remembering, denouncing, ridiculing, parodying, and so forth? The scandalous calumny about senescent sleep is apparent. In the words of Matthew Walker, the scandal is that they don't need much sleep. Their brains do not require it. No need to fix it. And may I make clear that the Berkeley Sleep Laboratories have millions now to study the sleep of the elderly. That's all they're doing. And their research is showing that what has come before is wrong. The elderly need sleep. I mentioned Dr. Nathaniel Kleitman earlier, the sleep guru who discovered REM. Kleitman was interested in the sleep of older adults and harbored no sense that they required less sleep than at other adult ages. He and his protégés demonstrated the decline in sleep pressure and hence in deep REM sleep in the elderly, but they never suggested it required less. They didn't make this an area of research. And there are many others today who are making it an area of research to show that the old do not need less sleep. I won't tease out all these passages with you after Kleitman. Walker summarizes them very well. Over 80% of the medical problems are arising because geriatric doctors are not familiar usually with the sleep problems, and they don't investigate them and send it forward. Older people experience more fractured sleep as they get older because of the changes that Inga Hilda showed us, but they require just as much quantity of sleep as those half their age, because this leads to illness and to morbidity. So page 97 in the book says it all. Even when controlling for factors such as body mass index, gender, race, history, frequency of exercise, medications, the lower an older individual's sleep efficiency score, the higher their mortality risk, the worse their physical health, the more likely they are to suffer from depression, anxiety, possible suicide, and the lower their cognitive function, typified by forgetfulness leading to dementia. If this is not politics of the elderly, I don't know what is. And why is it politics of the elderly? Because it would cost millions to change this approach to geriatric sleep. Think in this country alone what the NHS would have to spend to investigate the sleep of the elderly in the way that Walker wants. Now, in the memoir, I close with a passage about Atul Gawande, my friend with whom I very much agree about the elderly and what we've been doing to them in the last few years. I won't give you those words here, except to say that this is ultimately an argument about the politics of sleep. Thank you. As I left, speaking of politics of sleep, this greeted me in the Financial Times in London, their issue for the weekend. The sleep in the elderly. So it's not just among learned societies.